Okay, so here we are again, and we're all still muddling our way through this lockdown thing. And I'm thinking that right now, HR has never had a more important role to play, because it doesn't matter how clever you are, it's very difficult to predict as far as 400 days ahead of yourself. That's if you're an absolute expert. And if you're just okay rather than an expert, then usually you can manage, well, I don't know, say about 150 days ahead of yourself. And that's using all the maths you can possibly concoct and all the different ways of doing stats. But that's about how it pans out. And we're in a situation now where absolutely no one knows quite where it's going, except we all know it's going to be very different. And most people, I think probably all people, suffer from a great fear of uncertainty. We all like to have a strong idea of where we're going. And if we don't know where we're going, if we don't know where we're going next day, let alone next week or next month, then it creates a great sense of anxiety. And I sense that with many of the people I meet, quite apart, when they've got over the fact that their hair's too long and this, that, and the other, they're concerned about the fact that they don't have a plan. They don't have even a firm idea of where they're going to go on holiday. And if they do go on holiday, if they're going to enjoy it or not. I've been thinking also, not only is there the anxiety of not knowing where we're going, but also the importance, as far as HR is concerned, of thinking about the people they're looking after and about how challenging or unchallenging some of their time has been. Many young people will have gone back to their parents' houses, and although that's quite annoying in many ways, if the house is in the country and if there are a few fields around, they're having a pretty nice summer one way or another. That's not all bad. Not like their counterparts who perhaps don't have parental homes to go to, who are stuck in very tiny flats. That's a very different scenario. And they might be feeling as if they're pretty stressed and their own mental well-being is seriously being threatened. So there's that category. And I think thinking about these different categories is very important. You've got some people who are managing brilliantly because they're doing their yoga and they're even losing weight, they say. Then there are others who are feeling pretty out of control and they're gaining weight and they're feeling bad about that. So there are many categories of person to be taking into account. And slowing down to take all that into account, I think, is very important, not just for the well-being of each of us, but also for planning for companies. What are the challenges always people have? Well, I think commuting can be one big one right off, because some people don't even think they can afford it if they're really living outside town. It's expensive coming back in again. That's once they've got over the idea of wearing masks, and is that going to be safe? I think a lot of people are beginning to feel that because the tubes are still pretty empty, that won't be such a hard graft. But there's still the element of it's expensive, and they've all been furloughed. They haven't had money. They haven't got the money they're used to having, and they've got no promise of what lies ahead. So that's pretty challenging in itself. And then also, will other people want to come in? Will all the clients be there? What about technical adaptations? If you haven't got a laptop, what about that? What about the mums who've got children, two different age groups? One can go back to school, but the other one can't. So that means mum's stuck at home, or dad is, or alternately, one or the other is. So there's still so many uncertainties around that make life pretty uncomfortable the moment you stop and think about it. And of course, everyone is stopping and thinking about it, because thinking or reflecting, which sounds more pleasant, but reflecting is what we've all had plenty of chance of doing. And I think that one of the things that's been happening during this time is a lot of people have been reading, and perhaps for many of the women who've been doing their reading, that has been helpful for them, because I say women because apparently, if if women stopped reading, all the book clubs in the UK would collapse. Well, because women go to book clubs and men don't seem to. And certainly in a tiny percentage of numbers compared with women. And I think there's a certain value attached to those book clubs because it's always a matter of reading fiction. And I think that fiction, with all the various stories and the storytelling of other people's lives that you sink into when you're reading a novel, can be very helpful in giving insight and also helping creative thinking. Because when you're reading a story, you set to one side your own individual personality and you try and understand and put yourself in the shoes of the heroes, the heroines, the characters, to be able to understand and make the plot a realistic one. You suspend belief in order to properly assimilate the storyline and the characters. And in the act of doing that, it enhances your understanding of life, your way of perceiving things which you haven't actually experienced yourself, your way of imagining how it must be or how it might be if you were to be that kind of person, or if you were to run that kind of relationship, or if you were to travel to that country. And I think it's this kind of creative thinking that's going to be extremely helpful when we all get back to our offices. Because in a situation where you can't plan methodically exactly what's going to happen, because there are too many unknowns to be able to predict accurately, then being creative and being able to adopt different positions gives the flexibility and the imagination, which I think is going to be the saving of so many individuals and also their organizations. So as people are concerned about coming back to the office, I think it's going to be a bit like when you go back to the office after a maternity leave or after a long period of absence. It's going to be, what's it going to be like? How's it going to be? So the blessing that comes to my mind of learning to change the things that can be changed and to accept those things that can't be changed and to be able to tell the difference between the one and the other is going to be so important when we get back, in terms of making ourselves not only comfortable in our own minds, but also good workmates to the other people around us, to be able to give the kind of support that everyone's going to need. And I think that HR has never been more significant in the driving forward of all our companies than right now, insofar as it's always been down to them to be able to detect the sensitivities of the individuals within the organization, to know who's having coping difficulties and those who are managing, to be able to alleviate some of the unnecessary stress that people might be feeling, give them the space, give them the time, and make other people aware so that everyone can be kind and more generous to each other, as perhaps people might be slightly out of character because they're simply exhibiting the stress that many of us will be feeling. So that's my feeling about HR. And I'm thinking also that so many of our HR contacts are female. And I think as far as women are concerned, they have a kind of a superpower. And the superpower they have is the interest they have in each other. Even the ones they don't like very much, they have an interest. And I don't mean a business interest, I mean they just find people interesting. And I think that that superpower that women have to take account of other people and to find great satisfaction in taking account of other people and helping them through, in a very flexible, can-do-it kind of way is going to be a huge resource for all our organisations to look to and for HR to shepherd through. Thank you for listening.